The Australian dream of home ownership is collapsing. For millions, the roof over their heads is about to become a casualty of a system deliberately designed to fail them.
Can it get much worse? Like, what am I going to do?
I don't want to end up on the street, but that's how I'm seeing myself.
I'm seeing a lot of stress, a lot of disappointment, frustration. I've decided to suck it up and pay the extra.
There's literally no hope for me.
The clock is ticking and I'm just quite fearful.
I feel like I have a mother that has failed her kids.
Becoming a homeowner is slipping out of reach for many Aussies as the cost of real estate rises and wages don't keep up.
For generations, owning a home has been the cornerstone of the Australian dream. It's meant security, stability, and a place to raise your family. But today, that dream is turning into a waking nightmare for millions. The signs are everywhere. Mortgage stress at record highs, a cost of living crisis that refuses to budge, and a housing market that seems to defy gravity. You might think your home is safe, that your mortgage is manageable. But what if I told you that the very foundations of Australia's housing market are cracking, and that millions of ordinary Australians could soon find themselves without a place to call their own? This isn't fear-mongering. It's a cold, hard look at the economic realities deliberately ignored by those in power.
That $30 is more than her pension can stretch, so she's looking to move elsewhere.
Now I started doing that in last September, and I just can't find a property to rent that's affordable for me.
Even in regional areas.
And I applied for 10 properties in that area, which were really affordable, and I thought that I'd be really happy living there. And I was passed over every time.
By the way, if you're new to the channel, subscribe now for unfiltered truth about what's really happening to our country. Chapter 1. The Crumbling Foundation. Beneath the veneer of stability, a silent crisis is brewing. Mortgage stress is not just high, it's at levels not seen since the global financial crisis. Data from Roy Morgan shows over 1.6 million mortgage holders were experiencing mortgage stress in April 2025. That's nearly 1/3 of all Australian mortgage holders. Consider Sarah, a nurse from regional Victoria. She and her husband bought their modest home 5 years ago, stretching their budget. They've cut back on everything. No more holidays, no new clothes, even rationing heating in winter. Yet every month, the mortgage payment feels like a heavier stone around their necks. They're exhausted, constantly worried, and the dream they bought into is now a source of immense anxiety. This isn't an isolated case, it's the lived reality for millions.
We did this research back in 2017, and back then, on the average income, an Australian could buy around 40% of the suburbs within Sydney. And that's for houses. For units, it was around 34%, but that's actually dropped to 11% for houses and units. So it's a really significant difference. It means that buying a home in Sydney is just even less affordable than it has been for a number of years. So it's easy to see why first home buyers are feeling really disheartened and disenfranchised and feel like it's not really an option for them.
The recent RBA rate cut, while offering a tiny reprieve for some, has also reignited a dangerous fear of missing out, FOMO. It's pushing new buyers into an already overheated market, often at the very peak, believing they must act now or miss out forever. This cycle of desperation and inflated prices only sets up more Australians for future failure. Chapter 2. The Interest Rate Squeeze. The Reserve Bank of Australia's decision to cut interest rates to 3.85% in May 2025 was a small breath of fresh air for some, but for many it's too little, too late. Since May 2022, the RBA hiked rates by a staggering 425 basis points. For a typical $600,000 mortgage, that meant an increase of over $1,400 in monthly repayments.
According to the futures market, there'll be 3 more cuts at those 5 meetings, for a total of 5 this year. And that'll bring the RBA cash rate down to 3.1% and the standard variable mortgage rate down from just above 6% to just above 5%, as long as the banks pass on all the cuts, that is, of course.
Even with the recent cut, rates are still dramatically higher than when millions took out their loans. And the fixed rate cliff is still a terrifying reality. Hundreds of thousands of fixed rate mortgages taken out during the pandemic's record low rates are still due to roll off onto much higher variable rates in the coming months. The Commonwealth Bank estimates around 880,000 fixed rate loans will expire by the end of 2025. Imagine your mortgage payment suddenly jumping by 40% or 50%. That's the reality facing many. I recently spoke with a community worker who shared the story of a single father in Western Sydney. His fixed rate expires in August. His repayments are set to jump by $1,500. He's already working 2 jobs, skipping meals, and relying on charity for his kids' school supplies. He's looking at selling his home, but the market uncertainty means he might not even break even. For him, and for countless others, there is no more fat to trim.
The whole idea that you would let people borrow more on lower interest rates, I think it is really quite dangerous.
Chapter 3. The Debt Time Bomb. Australia carries one of the highest levels of household debt in the developed world. Our household debt-to-income ratio sits at a staggering 185%. This means for every dollar Australians earn, they owe almost $2. The vast majority of this debt is tied up in mortgages. This isn't just a statistic, it's a massive vulnerability. When incomes are stagnant and the cost of everything else is soaring, that debt becomes a crushing weight. People are using credit cards to pay for groceries, taking out personal loans to cover utility bills, and even dipping into their superannuation early. This isn't financial planning, it's desperation.
Even more concerning, 42% admit to missing at least one repayment. Looking at the generation divide, Gen Z is heading into the holiday season with a 111% jump in debt compared to last year, reaching an average of $23,900. That's the highest of any group. And meanwhile, baby boomers have the lowest debt at $7,200.
The problem is compounded by the fact that many Australians bought homes at inflated prices, often borrowing 80% or 90% of the property's value. If property values were to fall significantly, millions could find themselves in negative equity, owing more than their home is worth. This makes it impossible to sell without incurring massive losses, effectively trapping them in a debt spiral. We've seen this play out in other countries during financial crises. When people can no longer service their debts and they can't sell their assets, the only option left is default. And when defaults rise, the entire financial system feels the strain, leading to wider economic instability. Chapter 4. The Relentless Income Squeeze. While debt and interest rates have soared, incomes for most Australians have barely kept pace. Wage growth has consistently lagged behind inflation for years. In the year to March 2025, inflation was 3.6%, while wage growth was 4.1%. While wage growth finally edged past inflation, the cumulative effect of years of real wage decline means households are still significantly worse off.
Budget that delivers generational debt without the generational dividend. $1 trillion in debt and growing, deficits as far as the eye can see, but barely anything else designed to survive beyond the election. And that's the biggest risk in this budget, instead of laying out an economic vision. The government focuses on managing political perception. Both of those were set by Jim Chalmers in May 2021. You've just delivered a budget which forecasts a decade of deficits. $1 trillion debt, the next 4 deficits of $179 billion. My question, Treasurer, is, do you feel like a hypocrite today?
The average Australian family is facing a relentless squeeze. Electricity bills are up by over 10% in the last year. Petrol prices remain volatile, and a trip to the supermarket now feels like a luxury. A recent survey from Woolworths confirmed what many already know. Nearly half of Australian households are struggling to make ends meet, with grocery bills now the #1 concern. I recently overheard a conversation at a school pickup. A mom was telling another how she now makes one large meal a week and freezes portions to save on cooking costs and electricity. She used to buy organic, now she just buys whatever is on special. This isn't about luxury, it's about survival. This income squeeze means that even if interest rates stabilize, the fundamental ability of Australians to afford their homes is eroding. It's a slow, painful bleed that's pushing more and more people to the edge. Chapter 5. The Systemic Failures. This crisis isn't accidental. It's the result of decades of deliberate policy choices and systemic vulnerabilities. Government policy.
This is a Prime Minister with a budget with $1 trillion in debt and not enough to show for it, because it's absolutely riddled with rorts and riddled with waste and mismanagement. He's got a record of weak economic growth, stagnant wages, weak business investment, weak productivity right across the board.
Successive governments have failed to address the fundamental issues of housing supply, infrastructure, and fair taxation. Policies like negative gearing and the 50% capital gains tax discount have disproportionately benefited investors, pushing up prices and making homeownership unattainable for many. Over 2 million Australians own investment properties, and these tax concessions cost the budget billions annually. Investor dominance. Australia has one of the highest proportions of investment properties globally. When the market turns, investors are often the first to sell, potentially flooding the market and driving prices down further, exacerbating the problem for owner-occupiers. Lack of social safety nets. Compared to many other developed nations, Australia's social safety nets are increasingly threadbare. When people lose their jobs or face severe financial hardship, there are fewer robust support systems to prevent them from losing their homes. Homelessness rates continue to rise, with over 122,000 Australians experiencing homelessness on any given night. The system has been rigged, not necessarily with malicious intent, but through a series of decisions that prioritized short-term economic gains and the interests of a powerful few over the long-term stability and well-being of ordinary Australians. Chapter 6. The Devastating Human Toll. When a family loses their home, it's not just a financial transaction, it's a devastating human tragedy. It means loss of security. The fundamental sense of safety and belonging is shattered. Children lose their familiar surroundings, their schools, and their friends. Mental health crisis. The stress, anxiety, and despair can lead to severe mental health issues, family breakdown, and even homelessness. Lifeline reports a significant increase in calls related to financial stress and housing insecurity. Educational disruption. Children are forced to change schools, losing their continuity and support networks, impacting their academic performance and social development. Community erosion. When families are forced out, the fabric of communities begins to unravel, leading to social dislocation and increased strain on public services. We hear stories of people sleeping in cars, families couch surfing, and the rise of tent cities on the outskirts of our major cities. These aren't just statistics. These are Australians, just like you and me, who have been pushed to the brink by a system that has failed them. The human cost of this housing crisis is immeasurable, and it's growing every single day. The signs are clear. The combination of crippling household debt, stagnant real wages, persistent inflation, and an interest rate environment that remains volatile is creating a perfect storm for Australia's housing market. Millions of Australians are living on the edge, and for many, the dream of homeownership is about to become a distant memory. This isn't a conspiracy. It's the logical outcome of decades of policy decisions that have prioritized profit over people, and a failure to address the fundamental issues of affordability and supply. The question isn't if millions will lose their homes, but when and how many more will be swept away in the coming tide. The time to prepare, to understand the reality, and to demand accountability from our leaders is now. Because the old Australia, where a home was a right, not a luxury, is never coming back unless we fight for it. To understand how Australia's crisis affects you, click this video here.